Well, welcome everyone to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. It's great to have you back. If you're joining us again, if you're joining us for the first time, let me just remind you that we are the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation. We represent individuals and groups who support this notion of one man, one woman marriage. And as I say all the time, that's not to say that other things don't or shouldn't exist in a liberal democracy. They clearly do. Single parents, other sorts of couples. But the point we're making, and the reason we're standing here saying this, is because we think one man, one woman marriage is unique, it's special, it brings benefits to adults, to children in society, which nothing else matches. And we're not getting that from anything other than peer-reviewed research, internationally focused, over time, over societies, which unequivocally says that marriage between a man and a woman brings something that no other relationship type brings. And it's a real joy to have as a guest today, Maureen Martin. Now, Maureen, just say hello to our viewers, first of all.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Tony.
Well,
This is my first time on C4M.
It's such a privilege to have you on. Those of our viewers who haven't heard of Maureen yet, you're going to hear about her because she's a real superhero. Maureen's in a situation where holding down an ordinary job, we might hear a little bit about that ordinary job in due course. As part of that ordinary job, she thought she would stand for mayor of her local constituency in Lewisham in London. And as part of that, she put down in her statement that she would support marriage between one man and one woman as a key belief of hers because it's really important, really significant. And that's all she said. Short and the long of that story is she ended up getting fired from her employer for saying that. And just let me just start, and we're in a process now, aren't we? I think, Maureen, where you're challenging them. I think you've gone to the Christian Legal Centre, who are supporting you wonderfully, and amazing that they're there and able to do this. And let me make the point at this stage in our conversation. You're a Christian, which is great, but this is about a free speech issue, and it applies to anyone and everyone who thinks and feels independently of the herd, if you like, and wants to express how they feel. And so your case is really, really important because it's not necessarily about you saying, I believe this and this is my faith, and fair enough. And we've got supporters who are Christians, we've got supporters from all faiths and none. And I'm daily interacting with people who don't have any faith at all, but believe that they support us as an organisation because they believe in one man, one woman marriage and the evidence that points to that. So tell us a little bit more about your case then. So you had this election leaflet, as far as I understand it, along with other people's election leaflets, they're all published together. Yours said this. Were you attacked by single parents?
Not at all.
Well, that's a surprise.
No, I was attacked by what can only be described as a Twitter mob. My communication went out by mail, sent out by the local council, but whoever got it, obviously some people didn't like what I said. Fair enough. This is why we have free speech, right? Some people, when they got my communication, didn't like it, and they posted it on Twitter. And as a result, it started a bit of a Twitter attack. And then someone connected to this person who posted on Twitter happened to be a resident of L&Q, who I used to work for. Funny enough, a building I used to manage. That's why they recognized me. And they complained to my employer. And the rest is history. So what happened after that is L&Q not only received one complaint, I received two complaints from residents and a complaint from a colleague, which is quite interesting. Because I believe this colleague actually lived in the Borough of Lewisham and got the leaflet also. Bearing in mind, Tony, this leaflet went out to over 200,000 people.
Yep. And you had three complaints.
Exactly.
Let me guess, your employer said, hold on, she's allowed to say what she wants in a political leaflet in her own time. We're going to defend our employee to the hilt.
I wish they'd said that.
But they didn't. Right.
Oh, no, not at all. And the irony is, Tony, the same people, some people complained to Lewisham Council. Lewisham Council basically said what my employer should have said, basically. She can say what she wants as long as it's not hateful or inciting violence.
And let's at that point, right? So, and I know you've cited some European law, but and we'll talk about that now as well. But there's also, extant UK. There's case law that says, belief in traditional marriage, one man and one woman, is worthy of respect in a democratic society. That's senior extant case law. There's also legislation in terms of the Public Order Act that says, discussing sexuality and people's sexual preferences or marriage and the parties in connection to a marriage is not in and of itself hate speech. And so, the law is very explicit. We are legally allowed to talk about these things.
And plus, in addition to that, I have protections under the Equality Act.
Yep. Because of your faith.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All of these things my employer completely ignored and just stuck rigidly to their internal diversity and inclusion policies and their social media code of conduct. I mean, they're doggedly, rigidly sticking to this, regardless of what I said to them in the disciplinary or the appeal.
Yeah. So how long had you worked for your employer, your former employer?
13 years. Well, I was actually with them for 14, but I started as a temp in the admin department, a full contracted employee from 2008. That'll make 13 years with an exemplary record. As I ended up being a manager, so I worked my way up through the company.
And this all started to take place in April 2022 when you decided to stand as one of the candidates in your local mayoral elections. And that's when this all kicked off. So when were you actually fired?
Right. They actually fired me commencing from May the 9th with the actual date I was fired. That was on the back of a disciplinary. So we had the first meeting was like a Soviet-style interrogation, really. Then after that followed an investigation, which was a sham investigation, really. It was quite pathetic. And then the disciplinary. Now I appealed, after disciplinary this when they dismissed me, but then I appealed that. And of course they stuck to their decision. I knew they would. It's not, I wasn't even remotely surprised. And then after that, we are now in the process of going through to a tribunal and making our case before a judge. So it's quite interesting because when they announced to me that I was going to be dismissed, my immediate response was, okay, I'm going to appeal. I'm also going to the press. They clearly didn't believe me.
And do you think you would have gone through that kind of hassle if you had had a manifesto which said, I support trans rights, I support all sorts of marriage, I support thruples or something else like that? Do you think you would have had that kind of hassle from them, even though there would be many people in your constituency who objected to those statements?
No, of course not. Absolutely. In fact, I did put that question to them. I said, what if this was reversed? What if I had made a statement in support of the LGBT and same-sex marriage and a Christian resident had contacted you to complain? Would you have given the same response? Of course, there was silence. They didn't answer that question, of course. But we know the answer to that, don't we?
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I mean, you strike me immediately as a confident, resilient individual, but this must have made you feel a bit hurt because it must have kind of undermined your self-worth in terms of your job, in terms of your career. Tell us a little bit about how this has made you feel.
Well, initially, I felt really like they disregarded all of the years of service I put in to L&Q. And my Christian values and my Christian, persona, they benefited from greatly. I was always on time, worked overtime, always honest, hard worker, had a great work ethic. They benefited from me being a Christian. I never claimed expenses.
And you've never been accused or never had any cause to behave differently towards people who feel differently about some of these things to you? You've never been prejudiced? You've never... No.
Not at all. And of course, being in that sort of business where you're providing housing, you come across all kinds of people, the myriad of people. I've dealt with all of them, and I treat people with respect. And as individuals, it's not about what is external. If you're an individual, you're a person, and I treat you with respect.
So you're effectively unemployed now.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, without an income and having to go through a very expensive court case, I'm guessing, or tribunal case. And herein lies the problem, because there's a chilling effect. There's a lot of people up and down the land, and we've got tens of thousands of supporters who we're in contact with regularly, who feel exactly the same way as you do, Maureen. But a lot of them would be too scared to stand up and say it because they don't want to lose their jobs, because they would lose their home, they would losing their livelihood. That would, significantly impact their families and all sorts of areas of their lives, and they're worried, quite rightly, about putting themselves through that. What advice would you give for them? I mean, what would you say to people who think, I need to stand? I was talking to somebody on the phone the other day who was saying, this is going on in my workplace. I feel I need to say something in accordance with my beliefs, but I know what'll happen and I'm too scared. What would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, this is the issue, and it's a really, really, really important point to stress, that this is a tactic of intimidation, and it's sending a chilling message to people like that person you spoke to. I cannot express my true values for fear of losing my job. What I say to those people is, you have to make a calculated decision, do risk management, risk assessment. Now, are your values more important than your paycheck? I know you have bills to pay, but you have to make that decision. What's more important to you, your integrity or the paycheck? Your Christian values or the paycheck? Ultimately, if you're a Christian, God is there to look after you. He is ultimately your source, right? He's ultimately the source. So I would say to those people, pray about it. Don't just give a blanket, I can't do this because I'm going to lose my job. That is, I think, it's the easy way out. And it's exactly what they want us to think. It's exactly what the result of this particular cancel culture is aiming to produce, is fear. I cannot speak out. I cannot express my true values because I'm going to lose my job. And this is a message that they want to send out.
And it's a wider message of free speech more generally, isn't it? Because, yeah, okay, today it might be about, what you think about marriage. Tomorrow it might be about what you're allowed to talk to your children about, how you're allowed to raise your kids, what you're allowed to do and say and think and wear and be in public, where you're allowed to go. As soon as you start losing those freedoms of thought, of conscience, of speech, of religion, it's quite something, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. We are supposed to be a parliamentary democracy. Okay. We have a great document called the Magna Carta, over 800 years old. And all free societies, free Western societies, you can find all of their constitutions based upon the Magna Carta. Even the American Constitution, a lot of the ideas in it were taken from the Magna Carta.
Yeah, and not just that, but just as a society that wants to develop, we've got to be able to disagree with each other in a polite and friendly way, knowing that those disagreements may well cause offence because you might be deeply enshrined in your beliefs about something that someone else is disagreeing about. But that's how we improve: open, honest, frank debate with each other. And yeah, we can't just say, well, anything that offends anybody is something we can no longer talk about, because we will go nowhere as a society. And in fact, we've been there. It was called the Dark Ages and it wasn't pretty. And we don't want to go back there again.
Exactly, Tony. It's all about free speech. It's all about the freedom to practice our religion and freedom of expression. Article 9 and 10 of the human rights laws that we have enshrined in European courts.
Yep, European Convention on Human Rights. Now, tell me a little bit about your organisation. Were they, and I'm guessing here because I honestly don't know, were they Stonewall champions by any chance?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's a random question, but fair enough.
What a fortunate guess. Of course they are. They in fact, our CEO, my former CEO, boasted some time ago, it wasn't that long ago actually, this year, that L&Q were listed in the 100 top companies for Stonewall. and it was definitely delivered as a boast. So they are very much signed on to the Stonewall agenda and take a great point of pride, to excuse the pun, to announce this.
And there would be no objection if people complained to that. Of course, it wouldn't be heard. It wouldn't be listened to
Of
at all.
course, they dismiss. In fact, they might just say you're being homophobic, and this is what they keep me up being homophobic.
And on that topic of homophobia, you've been attacked in the media. Yeah, I think Pink News have written about it. So tell me about your experience with Pink News. Your interaction with them.
Well, I haven't interacted with them personally. They did a hit piece on me initially. They never interviewed me, of course. They just saw, they were exposed to my election campaign leaflet, and they did a hit piece. The leader of our party, the Christian People's Alliance, Sid Cordell, responded to their hit piece with studies that prove that children are better off being brought up by the natural parents, and that same-sex coupling parenting has quite a few problems.
And I think, as I said at the beginning, there's a plethora of work out there, and the large body of evidence clearly is in support of children growing up with their biological parents. And let's make the point. I mean, I grew up with a single parent. Actually, sometimes it works out okay, and equally, sometimes you've got kids who grow up with their biological parents, and it really doesn't work out okay at all. So, there are cases either way, and equally, you get some kids brought up in different types of relationships, whether they be same-sex, whatever, who turn out okay, etc. But on a population basis, and this is where policy comes in. When you're looking at policy for a country, when you're looking at media messages, when you're looking at school teaching, when you're looking at tax systems and other kinds of incentives, you do what brings the greatest benefit to the largest amount of people. And that's the thing you promote. And that clearly, by all the evidence, is one man, one woman marriage. And that's the thing we should be focusing on. And that's not for a minute to say that in a civil society, a liberal democracy, we shouldn't be able to discuss among ourselves whether we agree that other things should take place. But it's not marriage. It's not marriage. Marriage is unique, separate, special. And that's the point. And that's the point you were making in your leaflet. So one of the examples we often use, Maureen, tell me what you think about this, is that it's a bit like salt. Now, salt is one sodium, one chlorine atom binding together. Lots of those bonded atoms together forms what you might call table salt. And table salt has a particular purpose in life. It can act as a fertilizer. It stops the rate of decay. It brings out flavor, all sorts of things like that. And the fact that that exists is not phobic to any other chemical or any other compound. But when you start redefining salt to include things that look like salt, maybe sugar, cocaine, white powdery stuff, well, it's just complete confusion, isn't it? And that's the whole point with marriage. And I'm guessing the point you were making in your leaflet was exactly that it's not phobic to anything else.
No, it's just that, as you say, the stats prove the best option, the ideal situation for children is natural parents. Not saying all the other models are bad. We're not saying that fostering is bad. Of course not. We need foster parents. Thank God for people who are willing to foster those who are from broken homes. Single parent families, as you said, you came from a single parent. It's not ideal, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I mean, I'm pretty messed up if the truth be told, but that's a separate conversation.
Exactly. well, we've seen the results in my community, for instance, of single parenting. The illegitimacy rate in my community is 75% in the UK. 75% of Black, British, Caribbean children are born out of wedlock in this country. That's a horrendous figure.
Yeah. And it's a fairly new phenomenon. And again, the stats in terms of involvement with the criminal justice system, outturns in terms of education, the stats are very clear when you look at the link with fatherlessness,
Absolutely.
It's not.
You can't question it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it might be a good idea to get 20,000 police officers on the beat to catch crime, but wouldn't it be an even better idea to get 20,000 dads staying at home to stop it happening in the first place?
Absolutely. And this is the crux of the matter. To fix the problems, you have to go back to the fundamentals, and the fundamentals of the family units. And this is what the enemy has been trying so desperately hard to destroy that basic unit of husband, wife, and children.
Yeah, and the bonds that biological parents have with their kids, again, the research is quite clear, even for step parents. The research is quite clear. And this isn't to say that every step parent is a monster. Absolutely, certainly not. But in terms of the increased risk statistically for step parents, it is significant. If you're growing up with a man who isn't your dad, the risk is significant, and that's statistical. And that's not blaming anyone or pointing the finger at anyone. It's just looking, and on population basis, it's a different thing entirely. So nobody's saying that anyone's bad. It's just saying that in an ideal world, actually, there's more to marriage than love is love. It's about commitment. It's about saying the two of us are going to stick together through thick and thin, knowing that it's going to be hard, but we're making a commitment to each other. We're going to work together. We're going to work through it for the sake of the kids, for the sake of this thing called marriage, for the sake of society, for the sake of something greater than ourselves.
Absolutely. And this is what the point we're trying to get across. Now, when the other side of, the left liberals consider this hate speech, that tells it exactly how far we've fallen from our very, fundamental Christian foundations of this nation.
Yeah, and it's not hate at all. I mean, it really isn't hate. It's about, look, let's everyone's accepted, everyone's equal, but clearly some ways statistically are better than others, and we need to promote those wherever possible. Now, you mentioned left liberals. I heard somewhere, or I read somewhere, that you used to be a socialist.
Yes.
But you're not anymore. Well, that's quite interesting. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, obviously, I've grown up in a very traditional working class Caribbean British household, which is great. I love my heritage and all that stuff. And I went to Canada in 1989. I lived there for 14 years, came back in 2003. And by that time, in my 14 years there, I got saved. And when I came back, I sort of had a look at the political parties and decided I can't vote for any of these people because none of their values are consistent with mine. Okay, because when I left the UK, I was definitely a Labour voter. And as I said, I was a cultural socialist, i.e., because my family always voted Labour, because we deemed ourselves working class, and we always thought the Labour Party stood for the working class people and for minorities, we always voted Labour. I was a low information voter like most of my counterparts are. I never looked at policy, never looked at manifestos. I just voted Labour. That, I would say, was a cultural socialist. However, my values were definitely conservative.
Socially conservative with a small c, socially conservative.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say small c.
Yeah.
I believed in marriage, I wasn't a complete supporter of abortion. I was kind of, maybe on the fence, but I sort of knew there was something definitely wrong with that idea. I wasn't au fait with the LGBTQ movement. I always thought that was wrong. So generally speaking, yeah, with a small c, but definitely veering towards the conservative Christian side of things. But I still voted Labour. And you see the same dynamics in America, where you find that if you speak to the African-American community, their values are very conservative, but they vote Democrat.
So tell me this then. I mean, it's because back in the day when I did economics A-level and I did some economics at university, the difference between Labour and Conservatives really was about monetary policy, fiscal policy, how you raise money to spend, the size of government, things like, defending the workers classically versus, freedom, economic freedom for the managers to run their businesses. Those kind of divides doesn't really seem to be at the front of politics anymore. It's much more about identity and individual groups, and it seems to have changed. And we don't seem to talk about, tax and spending and size of government and supporting the workers or supporting the managers. We don't seem to talk about that anymore. What have you got any thoughts as to why things have changed?
I think because most of the parties have become a uni party. They're all the same now. The Conservative Party.
They've all coalesced around the middle, haven't they, really?
Yeah, absolutely. The Conservative Party liberalised, I would say, after Margaret Thatcher, I would say in the 90s and the 2000s. They started to get very liberal in their, ideology. to try and make themselves relevant.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there's kind of two additional theories. One is that a liberal democracy, which is the kind of thing we're supposed to be living in, a liberal democracy ends up eating itself because it becomes more and more liberal for smaller and smaller groups, and you get to the point. So the idea of a liberal democracy is we can all live the lives we want to in freedom, and the role of government is to stop any of us interfering with anybody else's freedom. Sounds really great, and to build some roads and some other stuff that we can't do ourselves. But then, of course, it gets to a point where people have their own version of truth, and in order to let them live their lives out in public, the rest of us have to believe what we don't believe. And suddenly, liberal democracy overnight becomes tyranny without realizing what's happened to it. So that's one theory. The other theory, of course, is that there are malevolent actors, and that, we've got things like the Gay Liberation Front from back in the 1970s, further to the Stonewall riots, in its manifesto aimed for destruction of the family, as the only way of progressing gay rights, whatever. I don't know, but it certainly seems that, some of what's happening isn't accidental. There seems to be, pressures afoot pushing things in certain directions through the media, through the politics, the mob mentality, that sort of stuff, because the numbers are tiny.
Yeah, they are. It's a minority. And in fact, I saw a study recently where people were asked, what percentage of the UK population do you think LGBT transgender comprise of? People were grossly overrating.
Yeah. Well, we published that YouGov poll ourselves. Yeah,
they think like 15%.
We distributed that.
It's only about 1.2% or something. There's 15%. It's nowhere near that figure.
And nobody's saying that. I mean, let me emphasize, spiritually speaking, from your point of view, from the point of view of a liberal democracy, everyone is of equal worth and equal value and an equal right before the law. Absolutely everyone. Whether you're Rishi Sunak with lots of money or whether you're somebody with nothing at all, you stand equally before the law and you're of equal value to society. But clearly, some ways are better than others, and the aim of government, from a policy point of view, which we've said before, is to create the most productivity, the best outcome for the largest amount of people. And what we're saying is that marriage is the way of doing that. And promoting all these other things, actually, if you look at the stats, is undermining marriage. Sex education in schools, statistically. We interviewed somebody recently, a professor of economics who's looking at this, David Payton, and he was quite clear. More sex education is leading to more teenage pregnancies. It's leading to more sex. Yeah, it's not doing what we want it to do. No. Yet we won't reverse the situation. And similarly, when we teach more kids about all sorts of other relationship types to the exclusion of marriage, or just put marriage somewhere else on the sidelines, what do you expect? When it comes through in our soap operas, when it comes through on the media, when it comes through in terms of what our politicians are saying, people are just going to do what they think they're being told. Yet the people who are getting married the most are the more well-off people. The people who are staying married are the more well-off, and the people who are suffering are the least able to bear it in society. And that's the real crying shame of all this rhetoric.
Absolutely. But they're being sold a bill of goods, basically.
Yeah. So listen, what's next for you? Where does it go from here?
Right. So we are continuing to press forward with our case. Hopefully there'll be much more media interest.
And this is the Christian Legal Centre are supporting you all the way through, are they?
Yes, they've been great.
That's just absolutely
They've been amazing,
fantastic.
Amazing organisation. Obviously, they're the legal arm of Christian Concern.
Well, Andrea, who's their chief exec, is one of my board directors. So I know how fantastic she is. That's
great. Absolutely. It's been amazing. I couldn't have done this without them.
So where does it go? What's your time frame? Do you know?
Right. So unfortunately, we don't have a date yet for the tribunal. I've been told it could be a year. However, we'll try and speed that up as much as we can. So that's the next step legally. Personally, for me, hopefully there'll be much more media coverage and get more exposure for this mission I'm on, I guess. We call it a mission. And hopefully get more traction. In fact, as an Australian news outlet picked the story up, and it got published in Australia, which is really quite promising. So we hope we'll get much more traction.
Well, it's internationally significant, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
It's internationally significant. So
absolutely.
Good for you.
And a point we did not touch on is the very unique case in the UK. It's the first time a political candidate has been penalised by the employer
because of your political statements. Absolutely right.
For making a political statement, exactly. And political speech is protected.
In manifesto information. That's absolutely right.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's unique in that sense. So I'm hoping to set precedents with this case to help others going forward.
Well, excellent. Well, will you, once you've gone through your tribunal and once you've won it, will you come back and talk to us again?
Absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, you obviously, you're making a stand on an issue very close to our hearts. There's very few of us at the minute willing to stand up and make that stand. We've got lots and lots of tens of thousands of silent supporters, but we need more people like you willing to stand up and speak out. Thank you for what you're doing. You have got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people backing you. In terms of free speech, you've got millions and millions and millions of people backing you because what you're doing is the right thing. And let me emphasize again, we're not saying that anybody is worse or better than anyone else or has any other status in society, equal or unequal. We're just saying that everyone should be able to say politely, kindly what they feel and think without fear of intimidation or losing their job. And you're standing up for that. So thank you very much. Maureen Martin, what a privilege to talk to you. All the very best.
Thank you for inviting me, Tony. And hopefully I'll see you again after my victory.
Look forward to it. Take care now.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.